But a couple of days ago, the best got even better because Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer. These two cameras, the Ricoh GR3X and the Ricoh GR3, are the best cameras for street photography, as we all know. But a couple of days ago, the best got even better because Ricoh released a new firmware update for both of these cameras. And as usual, when Ricoh releases a new firmware update, it includes some real improvements or new features and not just some ambiguous overall stability improvements that usually mean nothing to us end users. And if I'm counting correctly, this is already the third time this year we get a new firmware update for these cameras, and each time that the update has included some real new improvements or features, which is pretty cool, at least in my opinion. The latest version for the GR3 is 1.80 and for the GR3X it's 1.30. But the new features and improvements are exactly the same for both cameras. But of course the firmware itself cannot be the same because these are two different cameras. The new update brings us a total of 6 new features, and now let's check them out. Number 1 is a new memory function in the custom menu. There you have 22 settings that you can select whether the camera remembers those settings or not whenever you turn your camera off. It may not sound like a big deal at first, but let me share a couple of examples. Let's say you have a backlight situation, you walk down the street, you have a backlight situation, and you apply +1 stop of exposure compensation. You snap the picture, turn your camera off, then you continue walking, and after a while you see another situation somewhere in the shade, and it's overall a dark situation, but you want to grab that shot quickly. You turn on your camera and snap the picture, but the exposure is all over the place because you still had that +1 exposure compensation dialed in, which was of course not the best setting for that dark scene. But had you chosen the camera not to remember your exposure compensation setting whenever you power your camera off, that would have not happened. And here's another example that has actually happened to me a couple of times. I've been experimenting with the multiple exposure setting and taken a couple of multiple exposure pictures. Then I turn off my camera and I walk down the street and I see some street situation, decisive moment in front of me, and I try to capture that. But I still have the multiple exposure feature on, and I'm screwed because I can't capture that decisive moment. Had I chosen the camera not to remember the multiple exposure setting when I power my camera off, that would have not happened. These are just 2 examples, but I'm sure after a while you can figure out many other uses for this new memory function. Number 2 is improved video/wireless button here, the button that is here on the side of the camera. This button used to have only 2 customizable settings, but after this update it has 32 customizable settings. And that was one of the reasons why I never used this button. I had it off, completely off, so it wouldn't do anything because there was no suitable setting for me to put on this button. But now I can put or program the snap focus distance here. That is the setting that I frequently use. And it was a bit of a shame that there was a button here on the camera that you could only use for 2 settings or features, functions. And this improvement is really good and practical in my opinion. Number 3 is a new playback feature. Whenever you are in playback mode and you pinch the screen once, you'll get to see the thumbnails. And if you pinch the screen once more, you'll get to see your pictures by the date. And you can do the same by turning the front command dial. To me, this is not such a big or important improvement or new feature because I almost never browse my pictures in camera. However, if you like to process your raw pictures in camera or you just like to browse your pictures in camera, I think this is a new handy feature. And talking about in-camera raw processing, now you can batch process your raw pictures in camera. Let's say you have many similar pictures shot in the same situation and they all have the same exposure. You just select all those pictures and apply the same settings to all these photos and process them all at once. Very handy. And if your pictures are displayed by the date, you can select the specific date and process all the pictures you shot on that specific day all at once. And I think if you are frequently processing your raw pictures in camera, this new feature can be very, very practical indeed. Number 5 is 2 additional level gauge displays on the screen. So now we have a total of 3 different level gauges that we can choose from. There are 2 that are in the lower part of the screen and 1 that is in the middle of the screen. And for example, I think from now on I prefer the one that is in the middle of the screen because that's where I mostly look at when I'm taking my pictures, so it's easier to see the level gauge while I'm looking at my subject on the screen. Previously I had to sort of look a little bit down to be able to see the level gauge, and I use the level gauge all the time because I have a tendency to unintentionally tilt my camera and I get a lot of pictures where the horizon line is somehow tilted and then I have to correct that in post, which hardly is the best or ideal solution in most cases anyway. And the new feature number 6 is the 0.3 meter snap focus distance. So you can very quickly go to the minimum focusing distance by using the snap focus settings. However, it's good to acknowledge that if you are in snap distance priority mode, the camera will always default to f16 if you choose that 0.3 meter distance. But of course, if you are in normal snap focus mode, you can choose whatever aperture you want. So there you have it, every new improvement and new feature that these latest firmware updates bring to the GR3 and 3X cameras. And of course, not each and every one of these new features and improvements is useful for every GR3 or 3X user, but I'm pretty sure that at least 1 or 2 of these new features is useful or handy for pretty much every GR3 or 3X user. I think it's really amazing that Ricoh keeps supporting these little cameras, keeps bringing us new and improved features on a regular basis. It keeps these little cameras competitive and it keeps us users very happy. And please do leave your thoughts on these new firmware updates in the comments down below if these improvements or new features are useful for your photography. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, if this was useful or entertaining, please do consider buying me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below for that if you don't live in Finland. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll definitely see you in the next video.